All right, welcome to the video on more solving quadratics. Um, Today we're going to be covering another method on the solving algebraically front of this. Last lesson I let you know that there's two main ways that we solve these things. Solve by graphing was last time. Basically all you had to do for that one though was look at the graph for the x-intercepts and then that was it. So it's a pretty simple process with solving by graphing. Again, that only works really well if you have some type of graphing utility. So we're going to focus right now on solving algebraically. Now, solving algebraically, there are several ways to do this. These are the four main ways to do it. This should bring us all the way to the end of the year, by the way. But this week we are going to be focusing on solving by factoring. And let's take a look at this thing. So solve by factoring, a few steps you got to follow here. We've already solved it in factored form last lesson, so now the question becomes, well, what if it's not in factored form? So we're just going to add one extra step onto this, which is just a factoring step. If you need to brush up on your factoring, please feel free to look at the previous video on factoring, and you should be able to get caught up with there. I don't want to put too much into this video, though. So first off, make sure that one side is equal to 0. This is basically what we're doing in the past when we figured out that solving a quadratic is the same thing as finding its x-intercepts. So when we make one side equal to 0, that's the same thing as us saying that that's like y is equal to 0. So 0 out one side. Second step is if it's not factored already, make sure it gets factored. That way you have those two parentheses that you can break apart like we did in last lesson. And then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So like I said, this is just one extra step than we did in the previous lesson, and that's going to be the factoring step, which is technically not a new step since we've covered it in the past. Here is one example. So x squared plus 5x plus 6. We can already see that one side is already equal to 0. So step number 1, it's already done. So actually this is only a two-step thing. So second step is we got to factor this. So if you remember how to factor, remember there's a 1 in front. You make this x looking thing to help organize your thoughts. The 1 in the front times the 6 is a 6, and then the middle term's a 5. The 5 goes on the bottom. Our goal right now is to figure out two numbers that multiply to be 6 and at the same time add to be 5. Hopefully you can figure it out. That's a 2 and a 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. So 2 and 3 is how we're going to split apart this 5x. So that 5x becomes a 2x and a 3x. That's what we use this x thing to figure out how our x breaks apart. Now we have a four-term polynomial. Again, this is just a review of what we've done in the past. Don't worry about this equals 0 part. That'll just kind of follow it through till the end. We're going to look at these first two terms, figure out what can I pull out of both of these. If you still want to do the prime factoring, x times x, 2 times x, they both have an x that come out, and then you're left over with an x plus 2. For the second group, we know that I need an x plus 2 for this thing to work, so the second group's an also x plus 2. Now you just got to figure out what would I have to distribute into here to get 3x plus 6, and that's going to be a positive 3. So 3 times x is a 3x, 3 times 2 is a 6. You have these two groups that are the same, x plus 2, x plus 2. We're going to pull those out front. X plus x in this positive 3 is what the leftover is in the other parentheses, and then that's still equal to 0. All right. We are now at the same spot we were in the previous lesson, which is basically solve this part. So second step is done. We just factored. Third step, now that we know these two things are being multiplied and they equal 0, and it has to be 0. This does not work if this is a 7 or anything like that. That's why we 0 out one side up here. Since two things are multiplying to equal 0, we split it apart. X plus 2 must equal 0, or x plus 3 is equal to 0. One of these two things has to be a 0 to make a 0 when you multiply. And then just solve. You don't really got to show much work. These are pretty basic equations. So x equals -2 or -3, and you're done. Okay? That is how you solve this. Now, just to show you this, you don't have to graph this, but just to show you the graph, if we were graphing y equals x squared plus 5x plus 6, it would look like this. That's what this equation is, but remember, y is equal to 0. That gives us our x-intercepts, so this is actually what this graph would look like, and then notice the x-intercepts are here and here. Again, you don't have to graph this. I just wanted to show this so you can kind of see that it follows through to what we learned in the past. All right. That's about it. The rest of these are just going to be extra examples on factoring. If you feel really strong with your factoring, feel free to go ahead and try out the worksheet. Otherwise, I'm going to show a couple more examples, and then we'll be done. All right, so another example, 2x squared minus x minus 15. Keep in mind when there's a minus and no number here, there's a negative 1. There's a 1 here technically. Again, first step is to make one side equal to 0. It's already 0, so step 1 is done already. The next example, it's not going to be, so we'll figure out what to do with that. So if you're already good with this, go ahead and skip to the next example and then see what it's like when it's not equal to 0. Draw your x to help organize your thoughts. That's going to be negative 30, negative 1. So this one's a little more difficult than the last one because we got some negatives going on. So what we're going to do is I'm going to list all my factors of 30. Don't worry about the positive and negatives. But basically I want to figure out if the two factors can make a 1 somehow. So 1 and 30, if I add those, I get a 31. If I subtract, I get a 29. That's not going to make a 1. 2 and 15 is 30. When you multiply, 2 plus 15 is 17. 15 minus 2 is a 13, so I can't make a 1 out of those. 3 and 10 make a 30. That'll add to be 13, subtract to be 7, still not a 1. 5 and 6, so 5 plus 6 is 11. 5 minus 6 is a 1. Okay, so we're getting our 1, but we need a negative. So which one of these would have to be a negative to make a negative 1 when you add? Must be the 6. 5 plus a negative 6 is a negative 1. So 5 and negative 6 are our winners. So what we're going to do is split up this negative x to a 5x and a minus 6x. Again, we're going to look at these first two. What can I pull out of a 2x squared and a 5x? That would be an x. You get x times 2x is 2x squared. X times 5 is a 5x. I know that this group must be the same for this other group over here. Now I just got to figure out what number out here would multiply by 2x to get a negative 6x. And a negative 15 from a 5 must be a negative 3. Double check. Looks good. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Okay, these two groups are the same. X minus 3 is your leftovers, and you are done with the factoring step. And again, this is all review stuff, so hopefully most of you guys did pretty good on that factoring test, so hopefully it stuck in your head. Third step, once we have it factored and equal to 0, now we're going to split it. Color coded so you can kind of see where they came from. 2x plus 5 equals 0, so you subtract 5 and then divide by 2. It's a two-step equation. Hopefully you can handle that. So it's going to be negative 5 over 2. And then x minus 3, so you're going to add 3 to both sides. X equals 3, and you are done. All right. And last example. So this example is going to be one where it is not equal to 0. So first step, we got to do a little bit of work here. So keep in mind, you probably want to zero out the side that looks the least complicated, or if your x squared is a negative, you should always make it a positive by adding it to both sides. But in this case, let's try to make this side a 0 because all this stuff looks nice and neat already. So if I wanted to zero out this side, I have a negative 3x and a positive 8. So think of what's the opposite. What's the opposite of a negative 3x? That would be a positive 3x. That would cancel off, those go away. What's the opposite of a positive 8? That would be a negative 8. Those would go away as well. This would make 0. Keep in mind, what you do to one side, you must do to the other side. So if I add 3x to this side, I have to add 3x over here. If I subtract 8 here, I have to subtract 8 there. All right, so this side zeroes out. That's what our first step was. This side, just combine your like terms, and you will get x squared. There's no other x squared. 6x plus 3x is a 9x. 28 minus 8 is a 20. Now this looks just like the problems in the previous ones we were doing. So step 1 is done. One side is equal to 0. Step 2, we're going to factor this thing. That's a 1 in the front. 1 times 20 is still 20, and then you get a 9. What two numbers multiply to be 20, add up to be 9. You can make your list of factors if you want, or if you get better at this, you can kind of see it. So 5 times 4 is 20. 5 plus 4 is a 9. And if you can still split apart this middle term, but if you remember the shortcut that I showed you, if a is a 1, if this front number is a 1, you can actually go right into the factored form. This is just x plus 5 and x plus 4. Now, keep in mind that only works when there's a 1 up front, and I told you if you know yourself and you know that you're going to mess that up or you don't remember that, just keep doing it the same way that I taught you the first time, because that way will work all the time. Set them equal to 0. Again, this is a shortcut one, and now it is factored. Third step, go ahead and solve. So set each side equal to 0. Really simple equations here. Subtract 5, subtract 4, and you have your answers. All right. So that's it for this lesson. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or stop by my office hours. Check the bulletin board for announcements and things like that. Okay, take care. Bye bye.